There is a kind of pain that does not come from a stranger. It comes from the one who promised to stay. Audrey knew that pain well. This is her story, and it is not one to rush past. It is one to sit with, because somewhere in it, your own story might find its healing too. Audrey met Caleb at a small Bible study when she was 24. He carried his Bible everywhere, quoted verses with ease, and prayed out loud with a voice that made the whole room go still. Everyone said he was going to be a strong man of God. Her mother, before she passed, had told her, "Marry a man who prays before he speaks." So when Caleb asked her to be his wife 2 years later, Audrey believed she was marrying exactly that kind of man. The wedding was simple. No large hall, no long guest list, just close friends, a pastor named Miles who had watched Audrey grow up in the faith, and a small cake her aunt had baked. Caleb stood at the altar and promised, before God and everyone present, to love her, to honor her, and to remain faithful until death. For the first 2 years, life felt gentle. Caleb worked as an accountant at a small firm, and Audrey taught piano lessons out of their home. They prayed together most nights. They read scripture at the table. On the surface, their home looked like the kind of home people point to and say, "That's what a Christian marriage should look like." But slowly, something began to shift. Caleb started coming home later. First it was an hour, then 2. He said it was work. Audrey did not question him at first, because a wife who trusts her husband does not go searching for reasons to doubt him. She simply kept his plate warm and prayed for his safety on the road. Then came the nights he didn't come home at all. He always had an explanation ready. A colleague's car broke down. A late meeting turned into an early morning one. Audrey believed him, not because she was foolish, but because she loved him. And love, at its best, gives the benefit of the doubt before it gives up. It was on an ordinary Tuesday evening, while looking for his charger in the glove compartment of his car, that Audrey found a folded note. It was not addressed to her. The handwriting was soft and looping, clearly a woman's hand, and the words on it left no room for guessing. She sat in the driver's seat for a long time before she went back inside. She did not scream when Caleb came home that night. She did not throw his things onto the porch or call her sister to come take her away. Instead, she waited until he had eaten, until the house was quiet, and she placed the note on the table between them. "I found this," she said. "I think it's time you tell me the truth." Caleb did not deny it. He admitted there was another woman. Then, quietly, he admitted there had been more than one. He said the words every unfaithful husband seems to know by memory. It meant nothing. It was a mistake. He still loved her. It would never happen again. Audrey did not raise her voice. She remembered something her mother used to say, "When your husband falls, do not become his judge, become his intercessor." That night, instead of packing a bag, Audrey knelt beside their bed and prayed for her husband out loud, asking God to break every chain that had a hold on him. Caleb wept as she prayed. He promised to change. For a season, he did try. He came home earlier. He held her hand during service. He even led a short devotion one morning before work, the first time he had done that in over a year. Audrey allowed herself to hope again. But 3 months later, she found a message on his phone while charging it for him. Then, 6 months after that, a coworker of his called Audrey directly, not to cause trouble, but because her own conscience would not let her stay silent. Caleb had not stopped. He had only learned to hide it better. This time, Audrey did something different. She did not confront him with anger, and she did not pretend it wasn't happening either. She spoke to him plainly, the way Scripture speaks. She reminded him of his vows, not to shame him, but to call him back to who he said he wanted to be. She read to him from Malachi about God hating the treacherous dealing of a husband against the wife of his youth. She reminded him that marriage was never meant to be convenient. It was meant to be covenant. Caleb listened. He nodded in the right places, and then he went right back to the same pattern. This cycle repeated for almost 3 years. Confession, tears, short-lived change, and then a return to the same sin, sometimes worse than before. Audrey's friends began to notice the weight she was carrying, even though she rarely spoke of it outside her closest circle. Her friend Naomi, who had known her since college, was the only one who knew the full extent of what was happening at home. "Audrey," Naomi said to her one afternoon over coffee, "you keep praying for him to change, but when will you let God comfort you, not just fix him?" Audrey didn't have an answer that day. She only knew that leaving felt like giving up on what she believed marriage was supposed to be. She had built her identity around being a faithful wife, a woman who does not quit when things get hard, a woman who prays instead of walking away. What she had not yet learned was that faithfulness to God and blind endurance of sin are not always the same thing. Then came the years Audrey and Caleb tried for a child. Doctors ran tests. Nothing showed a clear medical reason for the delay, but month after month, year after year, no child came. Audrey grieved this quietly, the way many women do, tucking her disappointment into private moments of prayer where no one could see her tears. Caleb, however, began to grow cold about it in a different way. Where he once said, "We'll wait on God's timing," he began to say things that cut deeper. "Maybe I made a mistake. Other men my age already have sons. What good is a marriage with no children in it?" Audrey tried to remind him that a marriage was not measured only by what it produced, but by the covenant itself. She reminded him of Sarah and Abraham, of Hannah's years of waiting, of the many women in Scripture who bore the ache of an empty womb before God moved in their story. But Caleb was not looking for comfort from Scripture anymore. He was looking for a reason to leave with a clean conscience. It came to a head on a Sunday afternoon, after church, when Caleb sat Audrey down at the kitchen table and told her, without much emotion in his voice, that he wanted a divorce. "I can't keep living like this," he said. "You know I've tried." Audrey almost laughed at the strangeness of the moment. In her mind, she was the one who had tried. She was the one who had stayed up nights forgiving him. She was the one who had kept praying when every reasonable friend told her to walk away. But she said nothing sharp back to him. She simply asked, "Is it because of the child we don't have, or because of the women you keep going back to?" Caleb did not answer directly. He said only that their marriage had run its course, and that it was not fair to either of them to keep pretending. Within a few months, the divorce was finalized. Because Caleb had been the one managing most of their finances, and the home was in his name, Audrey left with very little. She moved out of the house they had shared for nearly 7 years and into a small rented room above a laundromat, the kind of place she never imagined she would live in when she was a young bride standing at the altar. Word spread quickly in their church community, as it often does, but the story that spread was not the true one. Caleb, wanting to protect his own image, let people believe that Audrey had been distant, cold, unable to give him children, and difficult to live with. Few people knew about the affairs. Fewer still believed Audrey when she quietly tried to explain her side. She lost more than her marriage in that season. She lost friendships that could not survive the whispers. She lost her small piano teaching business because many of her students' parents were connected to Caleb's side of the story and quietly withdrew their children from her lessons. She fell behind on rent twice and had to ask a distant cousin for a loan she was ashamed to ask for. There were nights she ate nothing but bread and prayed simply for strength to get through the next day, not the next month. The rejection cut in ways she had not expected. It was not only Caleb's rejection, it was the church members who stopped inviting her to gatherings, unsure of what to say to a divorced woman. It was the whispers in the hallway after service. It was the well-meaning but painful comments, like the woman who told her, "Maybe if you had prayed more for a child, things would have turned out differently," as if her pain were somehow her own doing. There was a particular Sunday, about 8 months after the divorce, when Audrey sat alone in the very back row of the church. the same church where she and Caleb had been married. She watched other families walk in together, husbands with hands on their wives' backs, children tugging at their fathers' sleeves. She felt invisible in a room full of people who used to know her name. That night, at home, Audrey sat on the floor of her small rented room, back against the bed frame, and finally let herself say what she had been avoiding saying out loud for a long time. "God, I don't understand you," she whispered. "I stayed. I forgave him more times than I could count. I prayed instead of leaving in anger. I tried to honor you in my marriage even when it hurt. And still, I ended up here, alone, poor, and talked about. What was the point of my faithfulness if this is where it led me?" There was no dramatic vision that night, no voice from the sky, no sudden burst of light in the room, just silence, and the sound of her own breathing, and a small, worn Bible sitting on the floor beside her, one she had carried since she was a teenager. She picked it up, more out of habit than hope, and let it fall open where it wanted to open. Her eyes landed on a verse in the Psalms, one she had read many times before but never truly felt until that moment. "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." She read it again, slower this time. Then she read the verses around it. She noticed something she had never noticed before. The verse did not say the Lord is close to those who have everything figured out. It did not say he is close to those with a full house, a stable marriage, or a clear plan for the future. It said he is close to the brokenhearted. That, at least, she qualified for completely. For the first time since the divorce, Audrey did not pray for Caleb to come back. She did not pray for a child to fill the space he left behind. She simply prayed for herself, for the first time in years, asking God to meet her exactly where she was, broken and unsure, rather than waiting to pray until she felt she had something to offer him. It did not fix her situation overnight. Her bills were still due at the end of the month. Her name was still misunderstood by people who had never asked her for the truth. But something small shifted in her that night, the same way a single crack of light can enter a dark room and change how the whole room feels, even before the sun is fully up. The following weeks were not easy, but they were different. Audrey began attending a much smaller church across town, one where nobody knew her history, where she was simply a new face in the third row. She did not go looking for a new husband or new friends to replace what she'd lost. She went looking for a place to be quiet before God without an audience watching her grief. It was there she met an older couple, Elena and her husband, who ran a small food pantry out of the church's side building every Thursday morning. Elena noticed Audrey sitting alone one Sunday and simply sat beside her, without asking about her story, without prying into why a woman her age seemed to be attending alone. "You look tired in your spirit," Elena said gently. "Would you like to help us on Thursdays? Sometimes serving others is what God uses to remind us we still have something to give." Audrey almost said no. She had nothing left to give, she thought. Her cup felt completely empty, but something in Elena's voice reminded her of her own mother, and she found herself saying yes. Every Thursday morning after that, Audrey packed grocery bags with canned vegetables, rice, and bread for families who had even less than she did. She listened to other women's stories, some far harder than her own, women who had lost husbands to sickness, to prison, to other struggles no less painful than betrayal. In serving them, something in Audrey that had grown numb over the past year slowly began to soften again. She did not know it yet, but this small, unnoticed room, filled with cardboard boxes and the smell of old rice bags, was where God had already begun writing the next chapter of her story. It would not come through a sudden proposal or a miraculous reversal of her situation. It would come slowly, through ordinary Thursdays, ordinary kindness, and an ordinary woman named Elena, who simply chose to sit beside a stranger who looked tired in her spirit. Audrey's part in the story was not over. Her lowest point had passed, but she did not yet know what God was preparing on the other side of her obedience. She only knew one thing for certain now, something she had learned the hard way and would carry for the rest of her life. Faithfulness to God is never wasted, even when it feels, for a long season, like it has cost her everything. Audrey kept showing up on Thursdays. Weeks turned into months, and the food pantry became less of a task and more of a home for her heart. She learned the names of the families who came through the line. She learned which children were shy and which ones would talk her ear off about school if she let them. She was not trying to build a new life. She was simply trying to be faithful with what was in front of her, one bag of rice at a time. Among the families who came each week was a widow named Serena, raising 3 children alone after her husband had died of a long illness 2 years earlier. Serena was quiet at first, guarded the way people become after loss has taught them not to expect too much from anyone. But Audrey never asked her for anything, never pried into her grief, and never treated her like a project to fix. She simply showed up, week after week, with the same steady kindness. One Thursday, Serena's youngest daughter, a girl of about 6, tugged on Audrey's sleeve while her mother packed the bags. "Are you somebody's mommy?" the girl asked, with the plain honesty only children have. Audrey knelt down to her level. "Not yet, sweetheart. But I would love to be, one day." The girl thought about this for a moment, then said, "You can be mine for today," and wrapped her small arms around Audrey's neck. Audrey did not know it then, but that small moment would grow into something lasting. Over the following months, Serena began inviting Audrey to dinner on Sundays after church. What started as a kind gesture between 2 women who understood loss slowly became something closer to family. Audrey helped the children with homework. She sat with Serena on hard nights when the bills piled up and grief resurfaced without warning. Serena's children began calling her Miss Audrey so often that eventually, without anyone deciding it formally, the youngest started simply calling her Mama Audrey. There is a kind of restoration that does not look like what we expect. Audrey had once believed that healing would come the moment a new husband walked into her life, or the moment a child was finally born to her. Instead, healing came quietly, through a widow's kitchen table and a little girl's arms around her neck. She had lost a household built on empty promises, but God was building her a different kind of household, one built on love that asked for nothing in return. Elena watched this unfold with a quiet joy. One Thursday, as they packed the last of the boxes, she turned to Audrey and said, "You know, when I first sat beside you, I thought I was comforting you. I did not know I was watching God restore you in front of my own eyes." Audrey smiled, but it was not the forced smile she used to wear during her marriage. This one came from somewhere real. "I used to think being useful to God meant fixing my marriage no matter the cost," she said. "Now I understand He was never asking me to fix anyone. He was asking me to stay close to Him and let Him decide what to build next." Almost 2 years after her divorce, Audrey received a letter that startled her. It was from a lawyer, informing her that Caleb had passed away suddenly from a heart condition no one knew he had. He had remarried within a year of their divorce, but that marriage had ended just as quickly, in another cycle of unfaithfulness that finally caught up with him in every sense. Audrey read the letter with a strange kind of sorrow, not for the loss of what they once had, because that had ended long ago in her heart, but for a man who had every chance to turn back to God and chose, again and again, not to. She did not celebrate his death, nor did she pretend to grieve a marriage that had already died years before it ended on paper. She simply prayed once more for his soul, the way she had prayed for him so many nights before, and then she let the past close fully, without bitterness holding the door open any longer. It was around this time that Audrey met Everett. He was not introduced to her through a dramatic moment or a matchmaking friend. He was Serena's late husband's cousin, a quiet man who had moved into town to help manage some family property. He began attending the same small church Audrey now called home, sitting a few rows behind her most Sundays. He noticed her first not because of how she looked, but because of how she served. He watched her patiently help Serena's children carry their bags out to the car each week, never rushing, never seeming to expect thanks. Everett was not a man who spoke many unnecessary words. When he finally approached Audrey after several months of quiet observation, he did not offer flattery. He simply said, "I've watched you serve people who can give you nothing back. That tells me more about your heart than anything you could say about yourself." Audrey was careful this time. The years had taught her not to trust smooth words or quick promises. She spent time watching Everett the same way he had watched her, not looking for perfection, but looking for consistency. She watched how he treated Serena's children, how he handled disagreements without losing his temper, how his faith showed up in small daily choices rather than loud public declarations. Slowly, over more than a year, trust was rebuilt in her, not given blindly, but earned patiently. When Everett eventually asked her to marry him, he did it plainly, sitting across from her at a small table after church one afternoon, not on a knee with an audience, but simply and honestly. "I don't want to replace anything you lost," he told her. "I want to build something new with you, starting from where you are now, not from where you used to be." Audrey said yes, but not out of desperation to finally have what other women seemed to have. She said yes because, for the first time since Caleb, she recognized in a man the same steady faithfulness she had spent years trying to give without receiving it back. They were married in a small ceremony, much like her first one had been, except this time, the room was filled with people who had walked through her hardest years with her. Serena and her 3 children sat in the front row. Elena stood nearby, tears in her eyes, remembering the tired young woman who had once sat beside her, unsure if she had anything left to give. Pastor Miles, older now but still steady in his faith, spoke a short blessing over the marriage, reminding everyone gathered that restoration rarely arrives the way we imagine it, but it always arrives on God's own timing. A little over a year into the marriage, Audrey and Everett welcomed a daughter of their own, a quiet, healthy baby who arrived without complication, in a season when Audrey had already stopped measuring her worth by whether or not a child would come. She held her daughter for the first time and thought back to all the nights she had knelt on hard floors, praying for a life that looked nothing like the one she was living now. She did not see her daughter's birth as proof that she had finally earned God's favor after years of suffering. She understood something deeper by then. God had not been distant during her hardest years. He had been present in every one of them, in the folded note she found in the car, in the empty apartment above the laundromat, in the quiet food pantry on Thursday mornings, in the small arms of a child who was not even hers yet. Her faithfulness during the pain had never been wasted. It had simply been planting something she could not yet see. Years later, when younger women in her church came to her, some facing their own broken marriages, some waiting for children that had not yet come, some sitting in the same kind of silence Audrey once sat in, she never told them a shortened version of her story to make it sound easier than it was. She told them the truth. That there were nights she doubted God completely, that forgiveness did not erase the pain, it simply kept her heart soft enough for God to work with. That her breakthrough did not come from finding the right formula to force God's hand, but from staying close to Him even when nothing made sense. God does not promise that faithfulness will protect you from suffering, she would tell them gently. He promises that He will be close to you inside of it, and that nothing you surrender to Him is ever truly lost. Audrey's story did not end with a perfect marriage that erased every scar from the first one. It ended, and continued, with a woman who had learned to trust God, not because her circumstances always made sense, but because He had proven, in the quietest and slowest ways, that He had never once looked away from her.